Got some great stories for you today. Curious to know what you would do if you were the person in the title story. Here's our first one.
I'm a paramedic, and lately I've been working at an isolation facility in the Canadian oil field, and it's just terrible. It brings out the worst in a lot of people, and it's kind of understandable. And once COVID is over, you could give me the choice between going back to this job or living with my member inside an anthill for the rest of my life, and I'd be slathering my loins in honey before you finish that sentence. How it works is we have a lot of large oil facilities in the area, and spring is when they shut them down, bring in hordes of workers from coast to coast, and perform maintenance as quickly as possible to get that sweet black gold flowing again. It was pretty much universally ignored how effing bad an idea that would be this year, and you'd never guess what resulted: a big old dumpster fire. An increase in cases was planned for. One entire work camp that could accommodate 1,110 was set aside for positive or symptomatic patients, and a few wings at another camp for about 200 people where we kept asymptomatic close contact cases, no symptoms or confirmed sickness. The oil companies paid the hospitality bill, and the workers that couldn't isolate at home had somewhere to stay. For anyone trying to picture a work camp, it's less gulag and more Motel 6. Private bathroom, single or double-sized bed, TV, Wi-Fi, yada yada. Just picture a mediocre motel, but a little smaller room size. 3 square meals a day, cooked in a kitchen or dining hall. It's usually served buffet style, but delivered to isolation rooms by medical staff because the kitchen staff's union rightfully said, heck no. The only thing that sucks about this camp is being isolated and monitored. I don't make the rules, and I don't even technically enforce them. I just tell people what the government has made law and why it's inadvisable to break them, or, in other words, F around and find out. People were free to leave at will, but they'd face serious legal issues. It wasn't a prison, and I didn't make the regulations. 14 full days in isolation was the mandate, and yes, it was inconvenient for everyone so required. I ended up at the smaller site where we didn't store active cases, thankfully, not because of risk, but the 1,100 person facility, being the dumping ground, was filling up fast and manpower was stretched to the breaking point. Our duties were mostly very non-EMS related. Drop off food, deliver booze, invade faces with nasal swabs, vitals, check people in, chaperone smoke breaks, and miscellaneous concierge things. My coworkers and I made efforts for our patients because it really is a stressful and crappy situation for them. Most people were pretty chill, if not outright pleasant toward us, but unfortunately we had a sizable group of loud, mean-spirited, entitled, and belligerent man-children. These enormous a-holes complained about everything from the government to the quality of steaks that they weren't paying for, and they also serenaded us with threats, profanity, death camp comparisons, general prickishness, conspiracies, anti-vaccine garbage, and angry yet vague tirades about their rights. This kind of hot garbage isn't uncommon for this province. We're basically Canada's Florida Panhandle, and come complete with all the lunatics and tomfoolery. This is not a work environment I greatly enjoyed, but I did have a moment of catharsis when I clapped back at our standout problem child. Mr. P, as I'll call him, was that rare 1 in a billion a-hole, a repugnant narcissist and sharp as a marble. His Medal of Honor citation includes the following highlights: hurling his lunch at the wall opposite his room door because he didn't like tuna, threats against other patients and one staff member, staggering out of his room to pass out in the hallway, wrecked on rum and near buck naked, perving on female staff members, smoking constantly in his room with the door propped open, turning it up to 11 while watching adult movies, screaming at an adjacent parking lot from his window while trashed at 9 a.m., and sneaking out on the back door while unescorted whenever he felt like it, and to meet a delivery driver after we took his booze away, all while breaking quarantine. Hilariously and obviously trying to forge the date on his information sheet taped to his door so he'd be out sooner, but we track it all in Excel, and, well, being himself. All this was in a 72-hour period, and we literally couldn't kick him out. Where else would he go? He was under quarantine. An amazing amount of forgiveness was extended to him by the camp operator and the oil company because of the stress of being quarantined. Eventually, Mr. P gets a visit and talking to by the RCMP, the police, call from his boss and the camp manager, all of which seemed to have made an impact. All parties were thoroughly fed up with his crap, and although he wouldn't be evicted, he would be, if he carried on, be facing a ban for life from every site owned by the oil company, fired from his job, and fined by the police. With his booze confiscated, I assumed he might behave closer to the 55-year-old man he is, but as it turns out, that was naive. I interacted with him more than anyone else, and I bit that bullet because I'm the veteran, the most jaded, and also, for some reason, he didn't sexually harass me. Unhappy with being unable to smoke in his room or wander around breaking quarantine as he chose, he picked me to use as his grievance. Every day we had 8 15-minute breaks scheduled to take people to smoke or just to get outside. As a chaperone, we would ensure no patients would touch door handles. We'd politely remind them about distance and not to pass out smokes to others. Mr. P didn't like the schedule, demanded, not asked, for more breaks, longer breaks, and breaks at the times he wanted. We'd honor some requests for favors, usually, perhaps take a worker or for a couple extra breaks. Doing the odd favor never bothered me for normal patients, but in his case, I would rather lick a cheese grater than expend 1 extra calorie for his comfort. My response to his whining was a hard no and no negotiation. He could follow the schedule or risk his job by smoking in the room again. He wasn't special, and we were just staffed enough to handle our workload already. I might have done him a solid if he promised me that he would use that time to go play in highway traffic. He'd grabbed my attention when I was handing out some lunches, and this is when the above request was gleefully denied. It was about an hour later when we got a call from Mr. P. He wasn't feeling good and he needed a checkup. I grabbed my kit some monitor thinking I had paramedic crap to do, but not believing I'd be lucky enough to have him actually be dying. He opens the door complaining of a cough and sore, dry throat. He put on the full act and I did my due diligence for funsies, took full vitals and notes, and he then piped up with some conspicuously prepared lines. "It's just stuffy in here. I don't think I need any medicine, just some air. Extra fresh air would probably clear this up. Yada, yada." His brain must be smooth enough to skip across a pond if he put faith in this cartoonish scheme. I just imagine his inner dialogue. "I'll just fake sick to get the thing he just refused to give me an hour ago. No one will suspect a thing." "Well," I say to him, "thank you for reporting your development of symptoms. If you could have your suitcases packed in the next hour, a vehicle will be arriving to take you to this other facility." Baffled, his master plan crumbled instantly. He made a futile effort to backtrack. Was he lying? Extremely likely. Just his bad luck, I take my patients at their word. I reported it, recorded it, and sent it up the ladder to my superiors immediately. No backsies, butthole. We ship out symptomatic and positive cases, and that made him someone else's problem, already a W. The other place is also much worse. Between the huge and unexpected inflow of cases, staff shortage, staff being overwhelmed, they get maybe 1 to 2 smoke breaks a day. Food is worse, late or arrives cold, rooms are smaller, and with all the positive cases, their security is increased. Sucks, I feel for all the guys there. I'll accept him. Oh, and because he developed symptoms, his quarantine days were reset from 7 to 14. Dude talked himself into another week of legally mandated isolation.
How would you handle terrible HOA neighbors? Ever since I've moved in, I've been going back and forth with my neighbor, a single mom with 2 adult grown children, where they have all tried to either park in my parking spot or block my driveway. I tried texting her to fix the issue many times. Finally, I had it reported to the HOA president, and they sent an email to all of us in the community with reminders on many things, including only to park in your own parking spot or designated areas. Me and my neighbor are the only people with parking spots. Everyone else just has their garage and driveway, and their guests park on the street. So she knows I complained about her, and that message was directly to her. Since that email went out, I had one incident with the mother of my neighbor visiting, and I went out to tell her not to park in my spot, as I had guests coming. She was only parking there until her daughter pulls out of her driveway, and she'll move her car into her daughter's driveway. Other than that, they haven't blocked me since, which I'm really glad about. The HOA president said that he will reiterate this at our next HOA meeting. The HOA meeting is next week. I feel like I should say something with the audience of all my neighbors, but I'm not sure what. Right now, the 2 grown adult children are avoiding me like the plague. I don't care that I made the right decision, as I gave them so many chances to just park on the street, which has plenty of street parking. They don't want to have to walk the 1 minute it takes to park on the street and walk into their home. Would you say anything at the HOA meeting? Do you agree with this? If they block your driveway, tow them. They'll learn real fast not to do it. If the reminder from the HOA solved the problem, let it go. Bringing it up at the meeting will just make you sound like you're complaining for no reason. If you say anything, I would just thank the board for solving your recent issue. And if you and your neighbor are the only ones with parking spots, nobody's going to care about your parking issue with your neighbor, and they'll likely think you're a butt for wasting everyone's time with an issue that only affects you and seems to be largely resolved. You're right, it's fixed, I'll let it go. I agree that just thanking the board will go a long way. Do you think that the issue's fixed, or what would you do? Here's our next story. Thanks for listening along. You'll enjoy this one too.
I worked up north in oil and gas doing site facility maintenance, and I started the job when the boom was happening, but we soon started down the backside and cuts were made. In order to cut costs, they cut our overtime, our hours, took away our flights because it was fly in and fly out, and generally made life miserable. I could see the writing on the wall, and I was an unticketed carpenter, so I decided to go back to school and get my JM papers. Before I went on my school break, we got a new journeyman, and he asked us how we can live on X amount of wages and pay for our flights as well. We told him that our wages are X plus 10. The company was paying new hires about $10 an hour less than us, which explained why they were trying to get people to quit so that they could replace them with cheaper labor. I had arrangements to do third and fourth all year together, but as my school day was coming up, they started talking about putting off my year 4, messing me around. It took me over a year waiting to get into that class, so I wasn't going to put it off. I decided to quit if they messed me, but I didn't tell them. So this is near the end of the calendar year, and school was November and December for year 3 and January, February for year 4. The first thing that I did was to schedule 100% of my dental benefits for December, me and my 2 kids. I also scheduled whatever else we could do dentally for the new year, early January. We also had a Visa account that was $1,000 per year for health spending. You could use it at the dentist for whatever wasn't covered. You could go to the pharmacy, the optometrist, those kind of things. So I went to Joe's Optometry and bought some sweet glasses for reading that had a picture of a horse with a guy with a stick and a little ball on it. I also got every bell and whistle for the lenses. Perfect customer. But that's not the compliance. The salesperson, bless her soul, offered me sunglasses, and I said I couldn't do that, it's only for health. She told me the insurance company doesn't get the itemized receipt, they just see Joe's Optical for X amount of dollars. Oh yeah, I'm in with some sweet Ray-Bans with 2 pairs of polarized lenses, no problem. So the company I worked for had a bunch of contracts, and there were about 800 employees in total. I'd say about 60% of them were single males, about 10% females, and the rest married guys. We had a junior Sparky who was all about bling, so I told him he can go to the optometrist with his card and get sunglasses. I told everyone on our shift, screw them, free sunglasses. I might not have overtime anymore, but hey, thanks for the sunglasses. And waited. And nothing happened. I was expecting everyone to be sending messages thanking me for the loophole, but nothing. So I showed Sparky the receipt and my Visa card number to prove that I had done it. The next day, I see him on Facebook with a new pair of sunglasses, saying that he had also ordered some limited edition Ferrari sunglasses from his local optometrist. Initially, he didn't believe me, but now he was all in. I picked the Sparky because he was about bling, but he was also with the company since day 1, and he knew absolutely everyone, including people on the other job sites. 800 people. Back to me. Because of the turnaround schedule, I was scheduled to go back to work somewhere around January 10th after they had unilaterally changed the deal. In school, we weren't allowed to miss days, so my kids and I had all of our dental work done in the Christmas break on the January side. Lucky for me. I also asked the dentist if I could pay it forward and pay for 2 cleaning sessions sometime in the next year. I used our Visa health card. What was left, I went back to the optometrist and I got 2 more pairs of sunglasses. I used up my Visa card and my yearly dental allowance in the first week of January. I officially quit the day before they forced me back to work. My coworkers told me in the middle of January there was a company-wide meeting about sweeping changes to the benefit program. They were changing companies to become more streamlined, and the benefits naturally were sharply decreased. The Visa health card vanished. My guess is because they had a $500,000 optometry bill. I finished school in the top 3 and happily had $10,000 worth of dental and $2,000 worth of sunglasses and glasses paid for in the last week of December and the first week of January. Not only do I wear my sunglasses at night, but the future's so bright, I gotta wear shades. Got my freshman dorm leader fired a year after he called the cops on me, posted by ReadG1. I first got to college my freshman year and met the dorm leader, RA at most schools, and like most colleges, the dorm leader was the upperclassman that lived in the dorms and monitored the freshman halls. My dorm leader's name was Julio, and at first, he seemed like a nice dude that minded his own business. He talked about how he would stay out of everyone's business if we would stay out of his. Also, he tried to be the cool dorm leader and always mentioned to me about how he drank tons of alcohol his freshman year in the dorms. He gave off the impression that he didn't really care if we ever drank in our dorm rooms, but to just keep it on the low if we did. I really didn't drink much at all, but I appreciated the fact that he seemed pretty normal and didn't try to rat on kids. During the last week of October of my freshman year of college, I had one of the hardest weeks of my academic career. I was a biochemistry major taking some pretty tough classes, and I had 3 exams that week. At the end of the week, a friend I had recently made down the hall invited me to his dorm room to watch an upcoming NBA game. As we were watching the game, he had a bottle of vodka and gave some to the guys in the dorm. Being a naive and stupid freshman kid just trying to make some friends, I took one shot of vodka and continued to watch the game. As we're watching the game, one of the guys in the dorm spills a bottle of soda and rushes to the bathroom to grab some paper towels. As he walks out of the dorm room, Julio walked by and noticed the bottle of vodka. He laughed and said something of the sorts of, "I remember when I was a freshman, just try and keep it down." And we thanked him and told him to have a good night. It seemed like a normal conversation and nothing out of the ordinary. 30 minutes later, we hear a knock on the door and 2 policemen showed up with breathalyzers. They told us that they'd received a complaint from Julio about underage drinking and a party being thrown in the dorm room. Remember, it was 3 guys watching a Lakers game on a Thursday night at 8 p.m. I ended up getting a minor in consumption charge for blowing a .02. Had to do 20 hours of community service, a reflection journal, and appear to the Judicial Affairs Center at my college about my supposed drinking problem. I'm not blaming the officer for giving me a ticket, but I was pretty upset that Julio, who always talked about getting messed up freshman year in the dorm, called the police right after he essentially gave us the okay for the night. A few weeks later, I see Julio and straight up asked him why he decided to rat me out. Specifically, I asked why he didn't just tell me to head back to my dorm if he had a problem with the alcohol instead of calling the police right after our conversation. He responds word for word with, "You made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision." After that incident, I never really talked to him, but he always tried to be buddy-buddy when he saw me in the hallway. Anyway, I eventually leave the dorms and move off campus for my sophomore year. I had decided to rush a fraternity my freshman year and ended up meeting some really nice guys. I had never been the fraternity type, but I went to a smaller college where fraternities are a lot different than most places. During the second semester of my sophomore year, my fraternity was taking a new pledge class. One day, I received a text from Julio saying, "One of the guys pledging your fraternity has been caught dealing alcohol to another freshman in the dorms. I thought I would let you know." Turns out Julio was the dorm leader for a freshman pledging my fraternity and ratted him out to Judicial Affairs as well. Thinking the term, dealing alcohol, was the lamest yet funniest thing I've ever heard, I sent that to our fraternity GroupMe and everyone laughed about it. About a week later, that kid pledging our fraternity came up to me asking about the message I received from Julio. Essentially, a pretty similar thing happened to him like what happened to me. Julio found out that he'd given another kid in the dorm a bottle of wine and reported it to the police. This kid ended up getting a minor in possession and had to speak with Judicial Affairs. This is where the story gets hilarious. In his meeting with Judicial Affairs, the kid pledging our fraternity told the Judicial Affairs guy that his dorm leader, Julio was now a senior at this point, had texted me about the charges pending against him. Apparently, it's a huge violation to discuss pending charges against a freshman in your dorm to a third party. The Judicial Affairs guy told him that if he could prove that Julio was discussing this charge with a third party, aka me, he would receive some severe sanctions. Basically, if I sent that text to the Judicial Affairs people, Julio would be in a load of trouble. So I sent the text that night to the Judicial Affairs people. After that, I didn't hear anything about what happened to Julio and had honestly forgotten about it. However, nearing the end of the school year in my sophomore year, I saw Julio at the dining hall and came up to speak to me. He tells me a story about how he knows I was the one that ratted him to the Judicial Affairs, how he ended up getting fired from his dorm leader position, lost the scholarship money his dorm leader job provided him, and overall, how crappy his life has been since he got fired. After going through his entire sob story, he asked me, "Why did you do that? This could have been handled completely differently. I didn't have to get fired and I could have kept my scholarship money." I look at him dead in the eye for what seemed like 30 seconds and say, "Julio, you made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision."
Sued the HOA. They towed my truck twice off my property with updates. Click the video on your screen so you find the final fallout of this one, and I'll see you there.